You tell yourself you're lazy, but it doesn't feel like laziness. It feels heavier than that. You open the laptop, you stare at the blank screen, and something inside you quietly says, "Not now." So you scroll, you delay, you promise you'll start tomorrow. But what if the real reason isn't laziness? What if your brain is protecting you from something much older and much more painful? It doesn't happen everywhere. You can clean your room, reply to texts, watch 5 episodes in a row. But when it's something that matters, a project, a post, an application, a difficult conversation, you freeze. And then comes the self-talk. Why am I like this? Other people just do things. I must not want it enough. Over time, this doesn't just affect productivity, it shapes identity. You start seeing yourself as unreliable, undisciplined, less capable. And that belief quietly influences your decisions. You aim lower, you avoid opportunities, you stop raising your hand. Psychology calls this self-handicapping, a behavior where you delay or avoid effort. So you have an excuse if you fail. But here's the part most people miss. Self-handicapping isn't about effort. It's about protecting identity. Because if you try fully and still fail, there's no excuse left. There's also something called evaluation apprehension, a fear of being judged by others, not physically attacked, judged. Your brain reacts to social rejection, almost the same way it reacts to physical pain. Studies in social neuroscience show that the anterior cingulate cortex, the part of the brain that processes physical pain, also activates during social rejection. To your brain, judgment isn't abstract, it's a threat, and threats demand avoidance. So when you delay starting, your nervous system isn't being lazy. It's trying to keep you safe. Safe from what? From exposure, from being seen and evaluated, from the possibility of confirming your worst fear about yourself. But here's the paradox. Avoidance feels safe in the moment, yet it quietly builds the very shame you're trying to escape. And the brain learns that pattern fast, which leads to the deeper mechanism. You are not broken, you are adapted. Somewhere in your life, being judged didn't feel neutral. Maybe mistakes were criticized harshly. Maybe praise was conditional. Maybe approval felt unstable. Your nervous system learned a rule: if I don't fully try, I can't fully fail. So procrastination became protection. Avoidance became armor. Laziness became our story. That hides a much more vulnerable truth. You care. A lot. And that caring makes judgment dangerous. But armor has weight. And you've been carrying it for years. Let's slow this down. Your brain has 2 major systems in play here: the threat system and the goal system. The goal system, largely involving the prefrontal cortex, helps you plan, focus, and pursue long-term rewards. The threat system, heavily connected to the amygdala, detects danger and triggers avoidance. When you imagine starting something important, your brain doesn't just see a task. It simulates outcomes. What if it's not good enough? What if people judge it? What if I fail publicly? That simulation activates the threat system. And here's the key. The brain prefers short-term relief over long-term growth. Avoiding the task reduces anxiety immediately. That relief releases dopamine. Yes, dopamine. Not just for achievement, but for escaping discomfort. So your brain learns avoidance equals sign relief equals sign reward. This is called negative reinforcement. You remove anxiety. Your brain reinforces the behavior. Think of it like a smoke alarm. It's supposed to detect real fires. But if it becomes overly sensitive, it goes off when you make toast. You're not avoiding because you're incapable. You're avoiding because your internal smoke alarm detects judgment as fire. And until you understand that, you'll keep trying to force discipline against a nervous system that thinks it's saving your life. But force rarely works against fear. So what does work? Not motivation, not hype. Something quieter. This isn't about becoming fearless. It's about retraining your brain's prediction. Here are 4 principles. Each one rewires the mechanism, not just the behavior. 1, shrink the exposure. What to do? Reduce the visible stakes of the task. Instead of finish the project, open the document and write 1 imperfect paragraph. Why it works. The amygdala responds to perceived magnitude of threat. Smaller exposure reduces threat activation, keeping the prefrontal cortex online. When the task feels survivable, your thinking brain stays engaged. Example: instead of posting publicly, save a draft. Instead of submitting, review privately. You're teaching your brain. Exposure doesn't equal catastrophe. 2 separate identity from output. What to do? Consciously label work as a version, not a reflection of me. Say, this is a draft, not my worth. Why it works. When identity fuses with performance, failure threatens self-concept. By cognitively reframing, you reduce ego involvement, a concept supported in self-determination theory. Lower ego involvement reduces avoidance. Example, if a post performs poorly, instead of "I'm not good," it becomes "that version didn't resonate." The brain relaxes when identity isn't on trial. 3. Schedule judgment. What to do: create a specific time for evaluation. Work first, judge later. Why it works? The brain struggles to create and evaluate simultaneously. Evaluation activates threat circuits. Creation requires exploratory cognition. By separating them, you prevent threat from hijacking focus. Example, write for 25 minutes. Review tomorrow. You're training the brain that creation is safe. Judgment has boundaries. Practice micro-exposure to imperfection. What to do: intentionally do small things imperfectly. Send a message without rereading 5 times. Share a minor idea without over-polishing. Why it works? Exposure therapy shows that repeated, controlled exposure reduces fear response over time. The amygdala updates predictions when the feared outcome doesn't happen. You're recalibrating the smoke alarm. Example, post something simple. Notice, the world doesn't collapse. Your brain learns. Here's the mental model. You are not fighting laziness. You are retraining a sensitive alarm system. Every time you avoid, the alarm grows louder. Every time you take small, survivable action, the alarm recalibrates. This isn't about becoming confident overnight. It's about updating predictions. Your brain once learned judgment equals danger. Now you're teaching it judgment equals information. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. You were never lazy. You were careful. Careful with your identity. Careful with your vulnerability. Careful with being seen. And that makes sense. But you don't need armor for every room anymore. You can start small. 1 paragraph, 1 imperfect attempt, 1 visible effort, not to prove something, but to update something. Because the next time you feel that resistance, it might not be a character flaw. It might just be an old alarm. And alarms can be adjusted gently over time. And maybe tonight, instead of asking, "Why am I so lazy?" you'll ask a different question. What am I afraid will happen if I try? Stay with that. It changes the story.